I'm Jonah Comstock, Editor-in-Chief of pharmaphorum, and I'm here with Cheng, Vice President of Cell and Gene Therapy at Amerisource Bergen. We're at the Reuters Pharma USA 2023 conference in Philadelphia. Thanks for chatting with me.
My pleasure.
So tell me a little bit about your role at Amerisource Bergen.
Sure. So my role is the enterprise leader for our newly established cell and gene therapy franchise. So our cell and gene therapy franchise spans across the different businesses that Amerisource Bergen has, ranging from transport and logistics, regulatory affairs, patient services and support, specialty distribution, and market access and consulting. So as you can imagine, there's many different roles that we play under the cell and gene therapy umbrella. So my goal is to unite what we do and make sure that we have a very seamless customer experience when we talk and engage with our clients.
And cell and gene therapy is sort of disrupting all those things that you just described, right? In terms of market access, the business model, and everything.
Yes.
Yeah, it's an exciting topic, an exciting time. You were in the cell and gene therapy sessions for most of the day, or?
Correct. Yeah, yesterday and today I had the opportunity to chair the session for the event for 2 days. So it was amazing to see kind of the progress and really the energy that we see in this community. So we talked about topics around regulatory affairs, policy, market access, but also commercialization and manufacturing. So it really takes a village to bring these therapies to patients, and it's just really wonderful to see all the experts contributing their time and energy to help patients around the world, really.
So the basic version of the story from the outside is that there are these new therapies, cell and gene therapies. They're expensive to manufacture and administer, but they have the potential to be disease modifying, which means that they might be, in some cases, one and done, right? In other cases, a lot fewer treatments than is traditionally available. There's a lot of them. You've only been a few cleared, but now there's going to be, in the next 5 years, they say maybe 40. And the big question is, like, how do systems adapt to them, right? Like, how do you pay for a one and done therapy? How do you get a payer to pay for it? How do you make these available to patients? So, I mean, that's the kind of broad strokes of some of the things we're talking about. But from where you sit, sort of like, what are the most interesting aspects of those trends? What are some of the things you think are kind of, what gives you, like, what do you get excited about when you think about the future of cell and gene therapy over the next few years?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I think it all goes back to the patient, and I believe that's how a lot of the people here at this conference feel about it, right? So again, if you think about just 10 years ago when the first CAR T was approved, just the fact that these patients with late-stage cancers had the opportunity to really turn their life around, right? That's what's so amazing about the science, and I think that's what we feel so strongly about as well at Amerisource Bergen. Like, how do you kind of improve the patient outcome? How do you improve that patient journey? Your question earlier around the cost of these therapies, right? It's highly related to the value of these medicines. And I would argue that for a lot of us, we believe that the value is there. But the question is, how do you translate the value, right, across the different parts of the country, across the globe, and making sure that patients have access to these therapies? So I would just kind of use, transportation or logistics, right, as a topic, because that's one of the things that we do for cell and gene therapy. So what's very different, especially for cell therapies, is this cold chain requirement that you may have heard about, right? Very, very low temperature. How do you ship that around the globe in a very timely manner? And that's not easy to do. I think, if you think about the COVID pandemic, which we're still in right now, just to ship those vaccines at a lower temperature and to make sure that those vaccines are accessible to many parts of the world, it's not easy. So now if you kind of triple that and think about the ultra low requirements for cell therapies, that's really hard. But again, that's what we do, right? How do you make sure that, in terms of access, we're not just talking about market access here, the actual physical access of the therapy, how do you help enable that? So with our work carrier business, right, we start all the way from the beginning, right? So when a pharma company is thinking about their clinical trial design and logistics, right, we step in there and to help make sure that as they kind of progress in the development journey, as they move to commercialization, as the patient population grows, which is great news for patients, obviously, right? that they can handle that, and there's no gaps whatsoever in their strategy and execution. So that's just one example of why you need a seamless execution just on one aspect, right, of cell and gene therapy administration. And I can go on and on today about what the other things that we do to enable that patient access. So I hope that helps kind of provide some context.
Yeah, absolutely. So you mentioned market access.
Yeah.
Can I ask you just a general question, and you can talk about cell and gene or even other things if you want to. What do you see are some of the biggest trends sort of affecting and shaping market access today?
I would say over the last few years, you're seeing more and more of a realization around the importance of value-based contracts, right? And I would argue, and actually, I think one of the speakers today talked about just 3-5 years ago, it was more of a concept, right, than a tool. Now, granted, value-based contract is not a tool that you want to use everywhere. It just happens, though, for gene and cell therapies, it's more likely to be useful, right? Again, depending on your population, depending on your trial design, depending on your product profile. But the reason why I think in cell and gene therapy that value-based contracts has become more of a solution that people are looking for is that you have this one-time therapy that you referred to earlier that you need to manage, right? How do you make sure that you're actually paying for the value? So I think that's a really exciting development. There's still a lot of implementation challenges that people worry about, right? So I think in the US, the portability of data and patients kind of moving from health plan to health plan, that's an issue, right? Some of the data accessibility outside of the US that imposes challenges as well. So, I think we're still in that growing phase, but it's just great to see kind of how people are putting their heads together to think about solutions for patients.
Yeah, I agree. I was able to catch the value-based contracting session at Cell and Gene track, and it was just fascinating. And as you say, it's become so much less abstract, and these are real contracts that are out there. One of the things that's interesting to me is this notion that value, when we talk about value, we're really talking about it in relative terms. So what's a cell and gene therapy worth? It's worth what it would cost to treat that patient through traditional means, and that's a chronic treatment over years and years and years. And so that you might balk at the price tag when you see it all together there, but when you think about what that represents and what the alternative is, it really is a paradigm shift, right? A sea change in how we treat these conditions.
Correct.
And that is exciting.
Very, very exciting. I think fundamentally, right, I think for all the different healthcare systems around the globe, right, it is a matter of opportunity cost, right? I think, all payers have finite budget, right? So it's about how you deploy your resources that brings the max benefit to your society. So I think, this is an ongoing challenge and issue that we need to solve, and it's not insular to cell and gene therapies. But I think what's different, and at least from my perspective, is that, because cell and gene therapy is forcing us to think outside of the box, hopefully kind of longer term, the ideas and solutions that we bring about can permeate to the other parts of the system or to the other modalities. And I think that's something that's very exciting about cell and gene therapy, as for that we don't talk about as much, right? I think we kind of talk about how exciting it is in terms of the science and the patient benefits. That's all true. But I think from a macro level, it's also exciting to think about how that could really kind of trigger some of these much needed changes that we need to really improve our system and healthcare.
Yeah, and so on that topic, when you talk about access, often goes hand in hand with equity, right? And that's been such a big focus today of health equity, and how do we make sure that the treatments that were developed are available to everyone who needs them, regardless of where they live, how much money they make, what they look like. And in cell and gene, that's especially thorny, I think, because these are new therapies, these are expensive therapies. So how do you think about that at Amerisource Bergen? What are some of the things that you do to try to make sure that as this field matures, it's becoming or remaining equitable in its access?
No, that's a great question. I think this is something that we hold kind of near and dear to our heart. We have a long history providing patient services and patient support in the US and also in other parts of the world, right? So that's a really effective way to address many patient access challenges, equity being one of them, right? So if you think about the patient journey, let's just take autologous cell therapy as an example, right? No, the patient journey doesn't start with when you have a diagnosis and you're prescribed a cell therapy. No, it starts when you first, talk to your local doctor or your community practice, and you go through a long journey before you actually, are referred to the centers of excellence who can diagnose a cell therapy for you. And then after that, and you know about this already, very long manufacturing process, preconditioning, infusion, and the 15-year long-term follow-up. So along that continuum of care, there's a lot of gaps where patients can easily fall through. So with the patient support programs that we can provide, we help minimize a lot of those, I would say, leaky points, right? So you want to make sure that the patient can continue and receive their care that they deserve. So, so that's one way, I guess, for us to really address that challenge.
Any final thoughts before we end the interview?
Well, thank you for the opportunity to speak with you again. Amerisource Bergen as an organization is committed to cell and gene therapy. We formally formed this group last year, but we've been doing different support services and offerings for more than a decade. So I think from a science perspective, it still feels like we're at the beginning of a very long arc of advancement, and this is something that excites us and me personally, and we are just looking forward to being creative and problem focused, and to be able to bring these therapies to more patients.
Awesome. Yeah, as a person who covers pharma, this is certainly one of the most exciting areas right now. And so it's really nice to get a chance to just sit down with someone who's 100% focused on it and get your perspective on some of these important issues that surround the breakthroughs.
Thank you.